would you do if you were on your way to be executed? Think about that. What would your last meal be like? What would you say before you were executed? In the United States, on the day after an execution, there are often reports of the prisoner's last meal and words. The stories have often included what the prisoner requested as his last meal, steaks to burgers, and his final words, defiance or asking forgiveness. Let me tell you the story of the last hours of 16 nuns. They sang the Salve Regina, Hail Holy Queen, on their way to be put to death. These 16 nuns were arrested over 200 years ago in France. They were herded in carts, mocked by crowds on their way to the scaffold where they were to be hung. According to the tradition celebrated in an opera by Francis Poulenc, the Dialogue of the Carmelites, on their way, they sang, Salve Regina, Hail Queen of Heaven. Think about that. Singing on the way to the scaffold. What an expression of faith and confidence in God. We have often sung the same Salve Regina, but what would your last words be? Would you sing the Salve Regina? On Wednesday, we celebrate a feast in honor of the Queenship of Mary. Just what does it mean when we sing Salve Regina, Hail, Queen of Heaven? Some things I know. I know it has no connection with present-day queens such as England's Queen Elizabeth. I also know that I can't understand the queenship of Mary without understanding the kingship of Jesus. One more thing that I know is that I can't understand the kingship of Jesus, Christ the King, without understanding Jesus' Last Supper, his meal, and the words he spoke, and what he did as he faced death. The kingship of Jesus. His kingship is often misunderstood. The crowds tried to make him a king as they understood it. The disciples did not understand when he tried to tell them that he must suffer and die. Jesus even had to rebuke Peter. Pilate mockingly said, "Are you a king?" When he was executed in the most painful manner possible, the crude sign above his head read, "Jesus Christ, King of the Jews." To understand Christ the King, we must remember what he did and said at his last meal. We all know that story, but do we understand its meaning? After supper, he stood, took a towel and basin, then washed the feet of his disciples, something a lowly servant did for his master. He became their servant. Knowing that they too did not understand him, he pointedly asked them Do you understand what I have done? I, your Lord and Master, King, have washed your feet. I want you to wash one another's feet in love. For emphasis, he even added, do this in memory of me. These were not empty words. The next day, he showed that he meant it when he suffered and died to show us God's love. Sadly, it is clear that they did not understand. How could they? What he did was such a shock given the society in which they lived. A leader and a king washing the feet of his followers. Even in our day, think of how bizarre it would be for the Queen of England to wash the feet of a Londoner from the working class. Only in the days after Pentecost would they finally realize what he meant by, do this in memory of me. Jesus' kingship is not about getting, but of giving. It's not about being served, but of serving. I have come not to serve, not to be served, but to serve. Jesus' kingship is about serving, helping, loving, even unto death on a cross, no less. It's about revealing the fidelity of love, even unto death. He turned everything upside down. Yes, he is a king, but not the kind of king that we think of. He is a servant king. We need to change our way of thinking about Jesus as king. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. Wash one another's feet. The Queenship of Mary. What do we learn about Mary's queenship from the kind of king that Jesus was? Mary is a servant queen. When Mary said yes, she in effect said yes to being the servant, revealing love, just as Jesus manifested love in both his life and death. Think about her life. From the beginning, Mary served God's good news by literally opening herself to bear this humble servant king. Mary served God's plan by immediately going out to serve her kinswoman who needed her. Mary served God's plan by nurturing the fragile life entrusted to her in her womb. Mary served God's plan by turning a stable into a home for Jesus. Mary served God's plan by pondering so many things in her heart. Letting go of her son as he began his public mission. Standing at the foot of the cross in his final act of service. Agonizing over the betrayal of Jesus by Judas and Peter, leaders from his inner circle. Trying to make sense of things with the confused and cowardly disciples in the upper room. She spent her life pondering all these things in her heart. The fact remains, she is a servant queen, serving God's plan. Let this mind be in us, which was also in Christ Jesus. How her life revealed God's love was not always clear to her. She trusted and believed. All this became finally and fully clear to her in her Assumption. Then all of the pondering made sense. Some things for us to ponder in our hearts. How important is it for us to know the details of how we serve God's plan? Can we live our faithful service even when we don't understand? If we can say yes, our lives will celebrate the queenship of Mary, the servant queen. Pope Francis, just a few hours ago, speaking out on the sexual abuse, that crisis that we face, reminded us, Mary, the first of the disciples, teaches all of us as disciples how we are to halt before the sufferings of the innocent without excuse or cowardice. To look to Mary is to discover the model of a true follower of Christ. When we sing Salve Regina, perhaps we can keep these thoughts in our minds.